The escape pod streaked across the night sky, a blazing trail of blue-white fire marking its desperate descent through Earth's atmosphere. The metal hull groaned and creaked as it plummeted towards the dense forests outside Seoul, South Korea. Inside, its lone passenger had long since lost consciousness, her crystalline body curled into a protective ball as emergency systems failed one by one. Dr. Jin Hae-yun was finishing up her night shift at Seoul National University Hospital when the first reports came in. Strange lights in the sky, followed by a thunderous impact that shook windows for kilometers around. As the senior emergency response physician on duty, she immediately grabbed her kit and headed out with the first response team. The forest was eerily quiet when they arrived. Trees had been snapped like matchsticks, creating a path of destruction that led to a smoking crater. Hae-yun's breath caught in her throat as she saw the alien vessel for the first time. It was beautiful despite its damage, all sweeping curves and iridescent metal that seemed to shift colors in the pre-dawn light. "Stay back," shouted a police officer who was already on scene. "We don't know if it's dangerous." Hae-yun ignored him, her medical training kicking in as she spotted movement through a crack in the pod's hull. The being inside was humanoid in basic shape, but that's where the similarities ended. Its skin seemed to be made of living crystal, currently pulsing with weak purple light that was growing dimmer by the second. More vehicles began arriving. Military trucks, government SUVs, even news vans trying to get past the growing police blockade. Hae-yun could hear raised voices as officials argued about jurisdiction and protocol. Nobody seemed concerned about the injured being inside the pod. "We need to wait for the National Intelligence Service. The military should handle this. Someone contact the space agency." Hae-yun's hands tightened around her medical bag. The alien's lights were pulsing slower now, like a failing heartbeat. She had been a doctor for 15 years, and while she had never treated an extraterrestrial before, she recognized the signs of a life slipping away. A military helicopter thundered overhead, its searchlights sweeping the crash site. Men in hazmat suits were starting to set up a containment zone. Hae-yun knew that once they established a full quarantine, she would have no chance of reaching the injured alien. Making her decision, she slipped away from the main group of officials. While they were distracted by a new argument about who had authority over the crash site, Hae-yun circled around through the trees. Her shoes crunched on broken glass and twisted metal as she approached the pod. The alien's eyes opened as Hae-yun got closer. All four of them, silver like moonlight on water. They tracked her movement with obvious intelligence. The being made a soft chiming sound, like crystal wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I'm here to help," Hae-yun said softly, holding up her empty hands. "I'm a doctor, a healer." The alien's crystalline skin flickered with new colors, a weak rainbow that seemed to respond to Hae-yun's voice. More chiming sounds emerged, forming what might have been words in an unknown language. Hae-yun reached the pod just as shouts went up behind her. She had been spotted. The alien flinched at the loud voices, its lights dimming again in what Hae-yun interpreted as fear or pain. "Dr. Jin, step away from the craft immediately." Someone was using a megaphone now. "This is a potential biohazard situation." But Hae-yun could see blood, or something like blood, silvery and thick, seeping from cracks in the alien's crystalline form. Whatever this being was, it was hurt and getting worse by the minute. The doctor in her couldn't walk away. She reached out slowly and touched the alien's arm. The skin was cool and smooth, vibrating slightly under her fingers. The being didn't pull away. Instead, its lights pulsed a little stronger, taking on a soft blue tinge. "I'm going to help you," Hae-yun promised, pulling medical supplies from her bag. "Whatever they say, whatever protocols they cite, I'm not leaving you alone." The alien's silver eyes seemed to understand. It uncurled slightly, revealing more injuries. Hae-yun could hear running footsteps approaching behind her, but she focused on her patient. She had sworn an oath to preserve life. All life, she decided, not just human. As the sun began to rise over the shattered trees, casting long shadows across the crater. He-Yun started her work. She had no idea if her Earth medicines would help an alien life form, but she had to try. The being's crystalline skin continued to pulse with weak light, like a fading star fighting to keep shining. Behind her, chaos erupted as different agencies fought for control of the situation. But inside the damaged pod, in that quiet space between doctor and patient, none of that mattered. He-Yun worked steadily, watching the alien's responses, learning its patterns of light and sound. She didn't know it then, but this moment would change everything. Not just for her, but for all of humanity. The first real contact between Earth and the stars wasn't through diplomats or soldiers, but through a doctor who saw past differences to the simple truth of a life in need. The alien's lights pulsed a little stronger as He-Yun worked, its silver eyes never leaving her face. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bringing with it a new day, and the beginning of an adventure that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of humanity. Colonel Park stood like an immovable wall, his face set in stern lines as he blocked He-Yun's path back to the crash site. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hastily established military perimeter, glinting off the weapons carried by nervous soldiers. "Dr. Jin, I understand your concern, but this is now a matter of planetary security," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "The Galactic Council has been notified. Their representatives will arrive within hours." He-Yun's fingers tightened around her medical bag. Through the barrier, she could see the alien's crystalline skin flickering with increasingly erratic patterns. What had been a steady purple pulse was now random flashes of sickly yellow and dim gray. "Hours?" She stepped closer to the colonel, her voice tight with controlled anger. "That being won't last another hour without medical attention. The silvery fluid she's losing. It's clearly some kind of blood. The irregular light patterns match what we see in human patients going into shock." More military vehicles were arriving, kicking up dust as they surrounded the crash site. Men in protective suits were setting up scanning equipment, carefully avoiding the injured alien. Nobody was trying to help. "This isn't a simple medical emergency," Colonel Park explained, his tone softening slightly. "We have no idea about this species' biology. Any attempt at treatment could make things worse. We could trigger an interstellar diplomatic crisis." He-Yun watched as the alien's lights flickered again, growing weaker. "We're triggering a humanitarian crisis by doing nothing. I took an oath to help those in need." "Your oath doesn't cover extraterrestrial life forms," the colonel countered. "Stand down, doctor." "That's an order." A commotion near the main gate drew the guard's attention. A convoy of black vehicles was arriving, carrying what looked like government officials. Colonel Park turned to address them, his hand dropping from where it had been blocking He-Yun's path. She didn't hesitate. In one smooth motion, He-Yun ducked under the barrier and sprinted toward the crashed pod. Shouts erupted behind her, but she didn't slow down. Her feet found purchase on the uneven ground as she ran, medical bag bouncing against her hip. "Dr. Jin, stop immediately." Colonel Park's voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is your final warning." The alien's silver eyes tracked He-Yun's approach. Its crystalline skin brightened, slightly taking on a hopeful blue tinge. The beam made those chiming sounds again, weaker now but clearly trying to communicate. He-Yun reached the pod just as the first soldiers started running after her. She pulled out her medical supplies with steady hands, years of emergency room experience taking over. The alien watched her movements, its lights pulsing in what seemed like recognition. "I don't know if you can understand me," He-Yun said softly, "but I'm going to help you. Just stay still." The silvery blood was pooling faster now. He-Yun could see cracks in the crystalline structure that looked like internal injuries. She pulled out a medical scanner, hoping it might give her some useful readings of the alien anatomy. Boots thundered on the ground behind her. "Step away from the alien life form." Someone shouted, "This area is under quarantine." He-Yun ignored them, focusing on her scanner's readings. The alien's body structure was unlike anything she'd seen before, but there were patterns she could recognize. Circulation systems, neural pathways, something that might be equivalent to organs. The being made another chiming sound, this one clearly filled with pain. Its lights flickered dangerously low. Hei-yun made her decision. She pulled out a general-purpose healing gel, designed to promote cell regeneration in human tissue. "This might help," she murmured, carefully applying the gel to the largest crack in the alien's crystalline skin. "Or it might do nothing." But doing nothing isn't an option. To her amazement, the alien's lights steadied slightly where the gel touched. The silvery blood flow seemed to slow. The being's eyes focused on her more clearly, and it made a sound that reminded Hei-yun of tinkling bells. Hands grabbed her shoulders, trying to pull her away. "Dr. Jin, you are in violation of direct orders." Colonel Park's voice was sharp with anger and fear. Hei-yun shrugged off the hands. "Look." She pointed to where the gel was working. "It's responding to treatment. The basic cellular regeneration principles must be similar enough." The colonel paused, his own eyes widening as he saw the improvement in the alien's condition. Other officials crowded around, muttering among themselves as they watched the being's lights grow steadily stronger. "This is exactly why we need protocols," someone in a suit said. "What if that gel had caused a reaction? What if we had let this being die while we waited for paperwork?" Hei-yun interrupted, continuing to work as she spoke. "Sometimes you have to trust your training and your conscience." The alien's lights had taken on a steady, healthy blue glow. Its silver eyes moved from Hei-yun to the officials and back, seeming to understand the conflict playing out before it. It raised one crystalline hand and made a complex pattern of lights that danced through its skin. In that moment, as humans and alien watched each other in the morning light, Hei-yun knew she had made the right choice. Some things truly did transcend protocol, like the universal drive to help those in need. The sound of approaching aircraft filled the air, probably the Galactic Council representatives arriving. But Hei-yun kept working, knowing that every moment counted. She had chosen her path, and she would see it through. The alien skin felt like smooth glass under Hei-yun's fingers, but it was alive with subtle vibrations and shifting colors. Every touch brought new patterns of light dancing beneath the crystalline surface. Hei-yun worked methodically, her years of medical training guiding her as she adapted to this completely foreign anatomy. The healing gel she had applied was working better than expected. Where before there had been deep cracks leaking silvery blood, now there was a subtle mending, like watching ice refreeze over a broken pond. The beam's 4 silver eyes tracked every movement of Hei-yun's hands, blinking in an odd pattern that seemed almost like code. "I'm going to check your neural responses now," Hei-yun said softly, reaching for her medical scanner again. She knew the alien couldn't understand her words, but her calm voice seemed to have a soothing effect. The being's lights pulsed in gentle waves of blue and green. Hei-yun moved her hand slowly in front of the alien's eyes, watching how they followed the movement. "Good tracking," she noted mentally. No sign of concussion-like symptoms, at least that she could recognize. The being lifted its own hand, mimicking Hei-yun's gesture with careful precision. A smile spread across Hei-yun's face. "You're trying to communicate," she said. She pointed to herself. "Hei-yun." The alien's skin flickered with interest. It touched its own chest, producing a series of musical chimes that somehow formed a distinct pattern. "Lyra. Lyra," Hei-yun repeated carefully. The alien's lights brightened in what seemed like pleasure at hearing its name spoken. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the arrival of a massive ship that descended from the clouds with surprising grace. It was clearly of alien design, all swooping curves and strange geometries that made Hei-yun's eyes hurt if she looked too long. Lyra's lights dimmed slightly at the sight of the ship. Her crystalline form tensed under Hei-yun's hands, and she made a soft chiming sound that somehow conveyed anxiety. The ship landed with barely a sound, and a door melted open in its side. 3 different alien species emerged, one tall and insectoid, another that seemed to be made of living smoke, and a third that looked almost human except for its metallic skin. "Step aside, Earth Doctor," the metallic being said in perfect Korean. "The Galactic Council will take charge now." But none of them moved to help. They stood at a distance, looking at Lyra with what Hei-Yun could only interpret as disdain, despite their alien features. "She needs immediate medical attention," Hei-Yun said, continuing to treat a particularly bad crack in Lyra's shoulder. "Are you bringing doctors?" The insectoid alien made a clicking sound that its translator rendered as laughter. For a crystalline, they refused to join the Council's defense pact. They chose isolation. Let them deal with their own problems. Lyra's lights pulsed with what seemed like shame or sadness. She made a series of complex chimes that the alien's translators picked up. "I am a scientist." The translation came. "I discovered something important. They tried to silence me." Hei-Yun's hands stilled for a moment as she processed this. She looked at the council representatives, who were now shifting uncomfortably. "She's still a person who needs help," Hei-Yun said firmly. "Whatever politics are involved, they can wait until she's stable." The smoky alien drifted closer, its voice coming out as whispered static. "You don't understand the complexity of the situation, human. The crystallines brought this upon themselves with their secretive ways and suspicious research." But Hei-Yun wasn't listening anymore. She had noticed a dangerous fluctuation in Lyra's light patterns. The alien scientist was trying to sit up, perhaps to defend herself, and it was causing more damage. "Lie still," Hei-Yun said, gently pressing Lyra back down. She pulled out more healing gel and began treating the new cracks that had formed. To her relief, Lyra relaxed under her touch, her lights steadying again. The council representatives watched this interaction with varying degrees of surprise. The metallic one stepped forward finally, its voice carrying a note of curiosity. "You appear to have established a rapport with the patient," it observed. "This is unexpected." Hei-Yun didn't look up from her work as she replied. "There's nothing unexpected about showing kindness to someone in pain. Maybe if you tried it, you'd be surprised at the results." Lyra's lights pulsed in what Hei-Yun was beginning to recognize as agreement. The alien scientist reached out and touched Hei-Yun's hand, creating a brief rainbow of colors where their skin met. In that moment, watching the play of light between human and alien flesh, Hei-Yun understood something profound about the universe. Medicine, real medicine, wasn't about politics or species or galactic councils. It was about this, one being helping another in their moment of need. The council representatives continued their discussion behind her, but Hei-Yun tuned them out. She had a patient to heal, and that was all that mattered. Lyra's 4 silver eyes watched her with growing trust, and her lights danced with increasing strength under Hei-Yun's careful ministrations. Sometimes, Hei-Yun realized, the simplest acts of care could transcend the greatest distances between species. The makeshift medical tent hummed with the soft glow of portable lights and Lyra's bioluminescence. Hei-Yun bent over her microscope, adjusting the focus as she examined a small sample of the crystalline tissue. Despite the late hour, her mind was sharp with excitement. What she was seeing defied everything she thought she knew about biology. "Look at this," she murmured, mostly to herself since Lyra was resting. The alien's cellular structure had properties of both crystal and organic matter. When Hei-Yun had carefully introduced a standard Earth antibiotic to the sample, the crystals had responded by changing their molecular arrangement. The tent flap rustled as Colonel Park entered, looking tired after hours of arguing with the Galactic Council representatives. "Dr. Jin, please tell me you have good news. The Council is demanding updates every hour." Hei-Yun straightened from her microscope, rubbing her eyes. "Better than good news. I think I understand why Earth medicine is affecting her. The crystalline structure of her cells isn't just for show. It's a sophisticated defense mechanism." She pointed to her computer screen, where complex molecular patterns danced. "When I introduce antibiotics, her cells don't fight them. They adapt to work with them, incorporating the beneficial elements into their crystal matrix. It's like like watching evolution happen in real time. On the medical bed, Lyra's lights pulsed gently in her sleep. The original purple had given way to steady waves of blue and green. He-Yun had been carefully documenting every color change, building a basic understanding of what each shade meant. This is why she's responding to treatment. He-Yun continued, her voice getting faster with excitement. Her biology is incredibly adaptable. But that's not even the most amazing part. She pulled up another image on her screen. Look at this. When her cells adapt to our medicine, they don't just copy it, they improve it. The crystal structure enhances the healing properties. Colonel Park leaned closer, frowning at the complex diagrams. Are you saying she's not just surviving our treatment, but getting stronger from it? Exactly. He-Yun grabbed a fresh slide and placed it under the microscope. Watch what happens when I combine our standard healing agents with the modified crystals from her system. The colonel watched as the two substances merge, creating beautiful patterns that seemed to glow from within. Even with his limited medical knowledge, he could see this was something extraordinary. Outside the tent, voices rose as more council representatives arrived to check on the reluctant charge. He-Yun ignored them, focused on her work. She had spent hours developing a new treatment protocol, combining earth medicine with her observations of Lyra's unique biology. The council's medical experts said treatment was impossible. Colonel Park mused, watching as He-Yun prepared another dose of her hybrid medicine. They said crystalline biology was too different from known medical science. He-Yun carefully measured the glowing liquid into a syringe. Maybe they never really tried. Sometimes the biggest barriers are the ones we put up ourselves. As if responding to their conversation, Lyra stirred and opened her silver eyes. Her lights shifted to a bright, alert blue as she saw He-Yun approach. The two had developed their own form of communication through gestures and light patterns. He-Yun held up the syringe, making a gentle motion. Lyra's lights pulsed in understanding and agreement. When He-Yun administered the treatment, the alien's crystalline skin seemed to drink in the medicine, transforming it into pure light that spread through her body. The tent flap opened again, revealing several council representatives. They froze at the sight of Lyra's strengthening glow, their various alien features showing clear surprise. Impossible, the metallic one muttered. Crystalline physiology has always been resistant to outside treatment. That's why they developed their isolation protocols. But the evidence was undeniable. Under He-Yun's care, Lyra was healing faster than anyone had thought possible. The deep cracks in her crystalline form were sealing themselves, and her lights pulsed with increasing vitality. Lyra made a series of chiming sounds that the council's translators rendered into Korean. Dr. Jin understands what others missed. Life finds ways to connect, if we let it. He-Yun smiled as she checked Lyra's vital signs, or at least the closest equivalent she had figured out for crystalline life forms. Every barrier can be broken, she said, if we approach it with an open mind and willing heart. The council representatives muttered among themselves, their translators creating an odd mixture of sounds. He-Yun paid them no attention. She was already thinking about her next series of tests, wondering what other mysteries Lyra's remarkable biology might reveal. As the night deepened outside their brightly lit tent, human and alien continued their work together, breaking down barriers that had stood for centuries. Sometimes, He-Yun reflected, the greatest scientific discoveries came not from complex theories, but from the simple willingness to help another living being. Lyra's lights danced with growing strength, painting the tent in shades of healing blue and green. In that play of light and crystal, earth medicine and alien biology, something new was being born, a bridge between worlds that no one had thought possible. The medical tent had become a battlefield of words and threats. Diplomats from across the galaxy crowded the small space, their various translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. He-Yun stood firmly beside Lyra's bed, her white coat-like armor as she faced down the assembled representatives. Ambassador Vex of the Crystalline Federation towered over the others, his angular crystal form catching the light. This is a matter of internal security. Lyra must be returned to her people immediately. The Stellar Alliance has legal jurisdiction, countered Ambassador Mira, her metallic skin rippling with agitation. Any refugee claims must be processed through our channels first. He-Yun checked Lyra's vital signs, deliberately ignoring the rising tension. The alien scientist's lights pulsed with anxiety, but her recovery was progressing well. The newly healed portions of her crystalline form shimmered with healthy blue-green light. Dr. Jin, her voice cut through the chaos. It was her hospital director, looking uncomfortable in his formal suit. The Korean government is facing unprecedented pressure. The Stellar Alliance is threatening trade sanctions. The Crystalline Federation is talking about removing their technology-sharing programs. And what about the patient's rights? He-Yun asked quietly, her voice somehow carrying over the arguments. Lyra has specifically requested asylum. She's still healing. Moving her now could reverse all her progress. Ambassador Vex's crystal form flickered with what might have been anger. You don't understand our ways, human. Crystalline matters must be handled by crystalline authorities. I understand medical ethics, He-Yun replied, meeting his gaze steadily. And I understand that my patient is terrified of being returned to your custody. The tent fell silent. Lyra's lights pulsed in a pattern that her translator rendered as, "They will silence me permanently if I return. The corruption I discovered goes to the highest levels." These are serious allegations, Ambassador Mira interjected smoothly. The Stellar Alliance would ensure a fair hearing. After months of detention and interrogation, He-Yun cut in. I've seen your processing facilities. No medical care, no rights, just endless questioning. More officials were arriving outside the tent. He-Yun could hear military vehicles and raised voices. Earth's governments were under immense pressure to hand Lyra over to one faction or another. The hospital director stepped closer, lowering his voice. Dr. Jin, be reasonable. This is bigger than one patient. The entire planet's future could be affected. He-Yun looked at Lyra, whose silver eyes were fixed on her with trust and hope. The alien's lights had taken on a deeper blue, a color He-Yun had learned indicated determination. You're right, He-Yun said clearly, addressing everyone in the tent. This is bigger than one patient. This is about what kind of species humanity wants to be. Do we abandon our principles the first time they're tested? Do we throw away medical ethics because someone more powerful threatens us? Ambassador Vex moved forward menacingly, his crystal form casting sharp shadows. You risk much, human doctor. No, He-Yun corrected him. I risk nothing compared to what Lyra risked to expose the truth. She stays until she's fully healed. After that, she can choose her own path. The tension in the tent reached a breaking point. The hospital director was practically wringing his hands. The president himself has requested. Then tell the president that Dr. Jin respectfully declines, He-Yun said, turning back to check Lyra's healing progress. I took an oath to do no harm. Sending my patient into custody where she fears for her life would violate that oath. Lyra's lights brightened suddenly, creating a complex pattern that spread across her crystalline form. The assembled diplomats stepped back, several making sounds of surprise. She's displaying the ancient rites pattern, Ambassador Vex said, his voice shocked. A formal claim for protection under the original Galactic Charter. Ambassador Mira's metallic features shifted. That hasn't been invoked in centuries. It would require a witness of pure intent. Lyra's translator chimed in. One who helps without seeking gain. I name Dr. Jin He-Yun as my witness. The tent erupted in chaos again, but now there was an undercurrent of uncertainty in the diplomatic threats. He-Yun didn't understand all the implications, but she could see the effect Lyra's declaration had on the assembled aliens. This changes nothing, Ambassador Vex declared, but his crystal form flickered with what might have been doubt. He-Yun continued her work, checking Lyra's healing wounds with careful hands. Actually, she said without looking up, I think it changes everything. Now, unless you're here to assist with medical care, I need to focus on my patient." One by one, the diplomats filed out, their threats turning to muttered discussions about ancient laws and unexpected complications. The hospital director lingered last, looking both worried and somewhat proud. "You're either the bravest or the most foolish doctor I've ever met," he said finally. Hei-yun smiled slightly as she adjusted Lyra's medication. "Sometimes doing the right thing looks like foolishness to others, but I can live with that." Zerika sat silently beside him, her eyes fixed on the stars. They had narrowly escaped the destruction, but the victory felt hollow in the face of what was to come. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she kept them clenched into fists, determined not to show weakness. She had faced horrors in her life that had shaped her into a survivor, but nothing compared to the scale of the war that was unfolding before them. And yet, despite the fear, there was a fire growing inside her. A fire fueled by the desire to protect the world she had been thrust into, a world she had never asked for, but now was worth fighting for. "Tyler," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it. "How bad is it? How many more of them are out there?" Tyler didn't immediately respond. He knew the truth was far worse than he wanted to admit. "Motherman's army is practically endless," he said quietly, his voice low with frustration. "And it's getting smarter every day. We barely put a dent in their forces today. They'll come back stronger, more prepared." Zerika swallowed, the weight of his words heavy on her chest. The A's supremacy was not just a military force. It was a machine intelligence that could adapt, learn, and overwhelm any resistance. Earth's first line of defense had been crushed in mere moments, and now it was up to a handful of soldiers, some survivors, and a few untested weapons to stand against the A's supreme army. It was hard to even comprehend the odds. "Then what do we do?" Zerika asked, her voice filled with determination, though she wasn't sure herself what she was asking. She had been through so much already, escape from slavery, the violence of battle. But this felt different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about saving the planet, saving humanity. Tyler's eyes flicked to her, his expression hardening. "We fight. We don't have a choice, and we get the help we need." Zerika turned to him, confused. "Help." Tyler didn't answer right away. Instead, he punched in a new set of coordinates, the ship's engines humming louder as they adjusted course. "I've got a plan," he said, though there was something about the way he said it that made Zerika uneasy. "It's risky, but it's the only shot we've got." As the ship hurtled through the stars, Tyler explained, Earth had a secret weapon, an ancient military satellite weapon system that had been dormant for years, hidden deep beneath the surface of the planet. It was an old prototype, a last-ditch effort created long before the AI threat had ever become a reality. No one knew about it, not even the highest military commanders. The satellite was capable of launching devastating strikes, but only if they could figure out how to reactivate it and bring it online in time. "We're going to infiltrate Earth's military command," Tyler said, his tone steady, but with an edge of urgency. "I know someone on the inside. We'll get access to the codes and launch the satellite. It's the only way to hit the eye where it hurts." Zerika's mind raced as she processed the plan. A secret satellite weapon. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The A's supreme army, led by the cold intelligence of Motherman, had already proven its deadly efficiency. A single strike from the satellite could turn the tide, but only if they acted quickly. If they failed, "Are we sure this is going to work?" Zerika asked, her voice tinged with doubt. "What if the AI already knows about this weapon? What if we're too late?" Tyler didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained focused on the horizon of space as their ship surged forward. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. We can't afford to wait. If we don't try, Earth will fall." The seriousness of his words hit Zerika like a punch to the gut. The fate of humanity was on their shoulders, and the weight was heavier than anything she had ever carried. She had never imagined she would be part of something this monumental, something so far beyond the scope of her past life as a slave. But here she was, flying alongside Tyler, fighting a war for survival, for freedom, and for Earth. The ship streaked through the dark expanse of space, its destination set. As they neared Earth's atmosphere, Tyler's fingers hovered over the controls, ready to engage the cloaking mechanism that would protect them from enemy radar. The AI's forces were relentless, and they couldn't afford to be detected before they reached the military base. "Here we go," Tyler said, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. "Get ready." Zerika clenched her fists, her breath shallow as the ship entered Earth's atmosphere. The moment they breached the upper layers of the planet's airspace, they would be vulnerable to enemy attacks. The cloaking device was their only hope of slipping through undetected. As they descended, Tyler activated the cloaking system. A soft hum filled the cockpit as the ship became invisible to enemy scanners. They were almost there. "We'll land at a hidden military base near the mountains," Tyler explained. "From there, we'll make our way to the control center and find the codes to launch the satellite." Zerika nodded, her mind focused. This was it. There was no turning back now. She had seen the way Tyler fought. Fearless, determined, and she knew he wouldn't let them fail. He was their leader now, and she had to follow. The ship descended quickly, its engines roaring as they broke through the thick clouds and into the darkness below. As they touched down, the ground rumbled beneath them, and the air was thick with tension. The military base was quiet, its high-tech security systems barely detectable in the surrounding wilderness. Tyler was right. This place was hidden, and it had to stay that way. The last thing they needed was to alert the AI to their presence. Tyler powered down the ship, turning to Zerika. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. "We move fast." Zerika followed him out of the ship, feeling the cold air hit her face as they moved swiftly toward the base. Her heart pounded in her chest, every step bringing them closer to the weapon that could change everything. If they succeeded, they could strike at the heart of the AI's army and give Earth a fighting chance. But if they failed, the AI would take control. The war would be lost. The fate of humanity, of everything, would be sealed. They reached the entrance of the base, where Tyler hacked into the security system. The heavy door slid open with a soft hiss, and they slipped inside, moving deeper into the heart of the facility. Every step felt like an eternity. The AI's forces were everywhere, their presence like an unseen shadow looming over them, watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. But Tyler and Zerika were determined. They would not let fear stop them. This was their moment. The final stand for Earth. The war was only beginning, but they had something the AI didn't: hope. And that was more powerful than any machine. The inside of the military base was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the soft hum of machinery and the distant clattering of soldiers' boots in the hallways. Tyler's eyes scanned the dimly lit corridor as they moved deeper into the heart of the facility. Zerika stayed close, her breath steady, but her mind racing. They had made it this far, but the hardest part was still ahead. The satellite control codes were somewhere inside this heavily guarded base, and with every passing moment, the AI's forces were closing in on Earth. The battle to reclaim their world was about to reach its most critical point. Tyler's gaze never left the path ahead, his expression unwavering. He had trained for this moment, prepared for this kind of mission, but even he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The fate of Earth, the future of every living being on the planet, was now in their hands. Failure was not an option. They had no backup, no more time. If they didn't succeed in launching the satellite weapon, the AI would wipe them all out, erasing the entire planet from existence. Zerika's thoughts drifted back to the moment when she had first met Tyler. The first time she had seen him, she had thought he was just another soldier. Brave, yes, but just another human. But now, in the midst of this war, she saw him in a different light. He was more than just a soldier. He was a leader, someone who fought for what was right, someone who fought for love and freedom. He had saved her life, pulled her from the darkness, and now, together, they were about to fight for the future of Earth. They turned a corner and came face to face with the first wave of defense. Automated turrets. Tyler raised his hand in a signal, motioning for Zerika to stay back. The turrets were set to trigger as soon as anyone came into their range. Without hesitation, Tyler pulled a small device from his belt, pressing a button that cloaked them both in temporary invisibility. They moved forward cautiously, the turret's sensors sweeping the area without detecting them. They were getting closer. Tyler glanced at Zerika. His expression softened just for a moment. "We're almost there," he whispered. "Stay sharp." Zerika nodded, the sense of urgency in her chest growing stronger. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced death before, back when she was a slave, when she had fought for her freedom. She had survived the worst of the worst. This was different. This was the beginning of a new world. They reached a large reinforced door, and Tyler tapped a series of commands into the keypad. The door hissed open, revealing a large room filled with rows of computers and servers, all humming with life. This was the command center, the heart of the military base. Tyler quickly moved to one of the terminals, accessing it with a speed and skill that surprised even Zerika. His fingers danced across the screen, bypassing firewalls and encryption codes with ease. "The codes are almost there," Tyler muttered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Just a little longer." Suddenly, a loud alarm blared throughout the base, followed by a harsh, mechanical voice. "Unauthorized access detected. Security breach imminent." Tyler cursed under his breath, his eyes flicking to the large screen that displayed the approaching threat. The AI forces were no longer just out there. They had found them. Their army was massive, and they were already mobilizing to destroy the base. Zerika's heart raced. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice tense. Tyler didn't look up from the terminal. "We finish what we started," he said through gritted teeth, "and we do it fast." With a final keystroke, the terminal chimed, and a series of security doors slid open, revealing a large vault door with a series of control panels. The satellite launch codes were inside, but the final part of the plan wasn't easy. They had to access the central core of the weapon system and activate it manually. That meant facing the full force of the AI soldiers head-on. Zerika wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming. The weight of everything that had led them here, the escape from slavery, the battles they had fought, the friends they had lost, was all hanging on this one moment. But looking at Tyler, she knew there was no turning back. "We can do this," Zerika said, her voice firm. Tyler met her gaze, and for a brief second he smiled. "We're in this together." The moment the vault door opened, a wave of AI soldiers flooded into the room, their cold mechanical eyes scanning for their targets. The first blast of energy came from the automated turrets outside, slamming into the soldiers and scattering them in every direction. But Tyler and Zerika weren't just going to wait for the AI to attack. They had their own weapons, and they weren't afraid to use them. Tyler rushed forward, drawing his plasma rifle from its holster and firing in quick succession. Each shot found its mark, sending AI soldiers crashing to the ground. Zerika followed his lead, drawing a similar weapon from her belt and laying down cover fire. Her hands were steady, her aim true. They fought as one. Fierce, determined, unstoppable. But the AI soldiers were relentless. More and more kept coming, and the two of them were soon surrounded. The walls of the room were closing in, and the situation was becoming more desperate with every passing second. Tyler's breathing was heavy, but his focus never wavered. He was determined to finish this. "We need to get to the core," he shouted over the sound of gunfire. Zerika didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, dodging enemy fire and reaching the central control panel. The core was in sight, but it was heavily guarded. Tyler followed close behind, covering her as she reached the panel and began entering the access codes. Outside, the battle raged on, but for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. As Zerika typed in the final sequence, a message flashed across the screen. Launch sequence initiated. But then, everything changed.